The funeral was over. Lee Dae-ho stood alone in his grandmother's small house on Kepler 442b, looking at the boxes of her belongings. The old woman had lived for 93 years, and she had kept everything. Every letter, every photo, every small thing that meant something to her. Dae-ho was tired. He worked as a language researcher for the galactic hegemony, studying how different alien species talked to each other. It was good work, but it was not exciting. Most days he sat in his office and wrote reports about grammar rules for alien languages. The pay was decent, and the hegemony needed people who could understand languages. His grandmother had raised him after his parents died in a mining accident. She was the only family he had left. Now she was gone too. He picked up the first box. It was heavy. Inside, he found old clothes, some jewelry, and cooking pots, nothing special. The second box had photos of family members he barely remembered. The third box was different. At the bottom of the third box, wrapped in an old blanket, Dae-ho found something strange. It was a metal container about the size of a lunchbox. It had a lock on it, but the lock was broken. Inside the container were books. Real books. Made of paper. Dae-ho had never seen real paper books before. Everything he read came from digital screens. The hegemony said paper books were wasteful and bad for the environment. Only a few very old books existed in museums, and they were kept. Behind glass walls, these books were different. They were old, but someone had taken care of them. The pages were yellow, but they were not torn. Someone had loved these books. He picked up the first book. The title was printed in an old human language called English. The Rights of Man, it said. Below that it said, by Thomas Paine. Dae-ho frowned. He knew English. It was one of the languages he studied. But he had never heard of this book or this person named Thomas Paine. That was strange. He knew most of the famous books from human history. The hegemony had a list of approved human books, and this was not on it. He opened the book and read the first page. The words were simple, but they said things he had never heard before. The book talked about how all people should be free. It said that no one should rule over other people without their permission. It said that governments should serve the people, not the other way around. These ideas were new to Dae-ho. In the hegemony, the alien rulers made all the decisions. Humans did what they were told? That was how things worked? That was how things had always worked, as far as he knew. He picked up another book. This one was called On Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau. It talked about what people should do when their government was wrong. It said that sometimes people should refuse to follow bad laws. The third book was a collection of poems by someone named Maya Angelou. The poems talked about freedom and hope and the strength of the human spirit. They made Dae-ho feel things he had never felt before. There were 12 books in total. All of them were about freedom, justice, and human rights. All of them said things that the hegemony would not like. Dae-ho sat on his grandmother's old couch and kept reading. Hours passed. The sun went down outside, but he did not notice. These books were telling him things about humans that he had never known. According to these books, humans had once ruled themselves. They had made their own laws and chosen their own leaders. They had fought wars for freedom. They had written beautiful things about justice and equality, but the hegemony taught that humans had been primitive before the aliens came. They said humans were violent and stupid. They said the aliens had saved humanity from destroying itself. They said humans should be grateful for alien rule. These books told a different story. As Dae-ho read, he began to understand why these books were hidden. The ideas in them were dangerous to the hegemony. If humans knew about their real history, if they knew about concepts like democracy and human rights, they might start asking questions. They might start wanting things to change. He found a note tucked inside one of the books. It was written in his grandmother's handwriting. It said, "These belong to your great-grandfather. He saved them when the hegemony burned all the human books. He said someday humans would need to remember who they really are. I think that day is coming soon. Be careful, but be brave." Dae-ho's hands shook as he read the note. His great-grandfather had risked his life to save these books. His grandmother had kept them secret for decades. Now they were his responsibility. He looked around the small house. Everything seemed different now. The furniture looked the same, but the world had changed. These books had opened a door in his mind, and he could not close it again. Outside, he could hear the sound of hegemony patrol ships flying overhead. They did this every night, watching the human settlements, making sure everything was calm and orderly. The sound had never bothered him before. Now it made him angry. Why did humans need to be watched? Why were they not allowed to rule themselves? Why had their real history been erased? Daeho carefully put the books back in the metal container. He would take them to his apartment in the city. He would read them all, every word. He would learn about human history, real human history, but he would be careful. If the hegemony found these books, they would be destroyed. And Daeho would probably be arrested for having them. He looked at his grandmother's photo on the wall. She was smiling in the picture, but her eyes looked sad. Now he understood why. She had known the truth about humans, but she had to live a lie her whole life. "I understand now, grandmother," he whispered. "I will not let them forget." The next morning, Daeho drove back to the city with the metal container hidden in his car. He did not know it yet, but his life as a quiet language researcher was over. The books had changed him. Soon, they would change everything. 3 weeks had passed since Daeho found the books. Every night after work, he went home and read them. The words filled his mind with new ideas. He learned about something called democracy, where people chose their own leaders. He read about freedom of speech, where people could say what they thought without fear. He discovered that humans had once written their own laws and made their own choices, but he felt alone with these thoughts. Who could he tell? Who would believe him? If he talked to the wrong person, they might report him to the hegemony. Then the books would be destroyed, and he would disappear into a prison camp. On Monday morning, Daeho was working late in his office at the Language Research Center. Most people had gone home, but he stayed to finish a report about alien grammar. Rules. It was boring work, but it paid for his apartment and food. The door to his office opened without a knock. Park Min-seo walked in, carrying a tool bag. Min-seo worked as a communications engineer in the building. He fixed computers and communication systems when they broke down. "Sorry to bother you," Min-seo said. "I need to check your computer network connection. We have been getting error reports." "No problem," Daeho said. He moved away from his desk so Min-seo could work. Min-seo plugged a device into Daeho's computer. Numbers and code appeared on a small screen, but as he worked, Min-seo kept looking around the office. He seemed nervous. "Are you okay?" Daeho asked. Min-seo stopped working and looked at the door. Then he looked back at Daeho. "Can I ask you something? Do you ever wonder why we humans are not allowed to learn about our real history?" Daeho's heart started beating faster. This was dangerous talk. "What do you mean?" "Last week, I was fixing a computer in the hegemony archives. I saw some old files that were not supposed to be there. Files about Earth before the aliens came. They showed that humans had cities, governments, and schools. Real civilization. But the hegemony teaches that we were just primitive animals before they saved us." Min-seo was still whispering, but his voice was getting stronger. "I think they lied to us about everything." Daeho stared at him. This man was talking about the same things he had been reading in the Forbidden books. But was this a trap? Did the hegemony send Min-seo to test him? "That is a dangerous thing to say," Daeho said carefully. "I know, but I cannot stop thinking about it. If they lied about our history, what else did they lie about?" Min-seo finished connecting his device and sat down. "I have been looking for someone else who has questions, someone who thinks like I do." "I think you might be that person." Daeho made a choice. "Come to my apartment tonight after dark. Apartment 4B in the Sunrise Complex. But come alone and make sure no one follows you." Min-seo nodded and left. That evening, Daeho waited by his window. At 9 o'clock, he saw Min-seo walking up the street. The engineer looked around carefully before entering the building. When Min-seo knocked on the door, Daeho let him in quickly. "Before we talk," Daeho said, I need to know. Are you working for the hegemony? Are you here to trap me? No, Mincio said. I hate them as much as you do. I can prove it. Mincio pulled out a small device from his pocket. This is a communication blocker. Any listening devices in your apartment are now useless. The hegemony cannot hear us. Deho felt some relief, but he was still careful. He went to his bedroom and brought back one of the forbidden books. Can you read English? Minecio's eyes went wide when he saw the book. Where did you get this? These were all destroyed years ago. My grandmother saved them? There are 12 books, all about human freedom and rights. Mincio took the book with shaking hands. He opened it and read the first page. His face changed. As he read, "This is incredible. This man, Thomas Paine, he is talking about ideas I have dreamed about but never heard anyone say. There are more," Deho said. He brought out the other books. For the next 2 hours, they read together. Mincio was amazed by every page. He asked questions about words he did not know. He wanted to understand everything. We have to share this, Mincio said finally. Other humans need to know the truth. How? If we get caught, we will be killed, Mincio smiled. I work with communication systems every day. I know how to send messages without the hegemony seeing them. I can hide data inside normal work files. I can make it look like routine computer maintenance, but really, we would be sending these books to other people. Which people? How do we know who to trust? I have been watching people for months. I know who asks questions. I know who looks unhappy when the hegemony makes new rules. I think I know at least 5 people who would want to read these books. They made a plan. Mincio would create a secret communication network. He would scan the books and turn them into digital files. Then he would hide those files inside normal data transmissions. To anyone watching, it would look like he was doing his regular job. They would start with 2 people. Choi Hai-jin was a teacher at the human school. She had been asking why human children were taught to be ashamed of being human. Kim Tae-young was a former security officer who had quit his job because he did not like following hegemony orders. We need code names, Mincio said. If our messages are discovered, they should not lead back to us. What should we call ourselves? Deho asked. The readers, Mincio said. We read the truth. They decided to use lines from the poetry book as code words. If someone sent a message that began with, I know why the caged bird sings, it meant they wanted to join the group. If a message said, the night is darkest before dawn, it meant danger was near. Before Mincio left, he copied the first book onto a small memory device. I will send this to Hai-jin tomorrow. If she responds well, we will know we can trust her. After Mincio was gone, Deho sat alone with the books. He was scared, but also excited. For the first time since finding the books, he was not alone. Someone else understood what these words meant. He picked up the book of poems and read his favorite line. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Soon, Deho thought, their story would be told. The truth about humans would spread. The hegemony had kept humans in darkness for too long. The revolution was beginning, one reader at a time. 2 months had passed since the readers began sharing the forbidden books. Their network had grown slowly and carefully. Choi Hai-jin and Kim Tae-young had joined them after reading the first book. They found 3 more people they could trust. Then those people found others. Now 12 humans knew the truth about their history. They met in small groups, never more than 3 people at once. They read the books together and talked about what they meant. Each person made copies of the books to share with new members. Deho felt hopeful for the first time in years. But that hope was about to be tested in the worst way possible. The news came on a Tuesday morning. Deho was drinking coffee in his office when his computer screen flashed with an emergency message from the Hegemony News Service. Mining colony riot ended, the headline said. Order restored on New Bison. Deho read the story with growing horror. Workers on the mining planet New Bison had protested against dangerous working conditions. They wanted better safety equipment and shorter work hours. The protest had been peaceful. Just workers holding signs and refusing to go into the mines. The hegemony's response was brutal. They sent soldiers to break up the protest. When the workers would not leave, the soldiers opened fire. 47 humans were killed. Over 100 more were wounded. The news report called it a necessary action to maintain order. It said the human workers were influenced by dangerous ideas and needed to be reminded of their place in the galactic community. Deho felt sick. These were innocent people who just wanted to be safe at work. They had families, children, dreams. Now they were dead because they dared to ask for basic human dignity. He thought about the books hidden in his apartment. Thomas Paine had written about the right to protest unfair treatment. Henry David Thoreau had written about standing up to unjust laws. The poems talked about the courage to fight for what was right. These dead workers had been doing exactly what the books said people should do. They had stood up for themselves. And they were murdered for it. That evening, the readers held an emergency meeting in Kim Tae-young's basement. All 12 members came, breaking their own safety rules. They were too angry and sad to be careful. "This is what happens when people try to stand up," said Haijin. She had been crying. "The hegemony will kill anyone who questions them." "Those workers did not even know about our books," said Tae-young. "They were just tired of being treated like slaves, but the hegemony killed them anyway." "We should stop," said one of the newer members, a man named Lee Chang-ho. "If they find out about us, we will end up like those miners." "No," Daeho said firmly. "This is exactly why we cannot stop. The hegemony killed those people because they are afraid. They are afraid that humans are starting to remember who we really are." Minesio looked up from his computer. "I have been monitoring hegemony communications. They are very worried about what they call increased human unrest. Our books are working. People are starting to think differently, even if they have not read the books themselves." "But what can we do?" asked Haijin. "We are just 12 people. With some old books, they have armies and spaceships." Daeho had been thinking about this all day. "We need to do more than just share the books quietly. We need to let all humans know what really happened on New Bisan. We need to tell them the truth about their history." "How?" asked Tae-young. Daeho looked at Minesio. "Can you break into the communication system? Can you broadcast a message to all the human colonies?" Minesio's eyes went wide. "That would be incredibly dangerous. If they trace it back to us?" "I know," Daeho said. "But those 47 people died for nothing if we do not act. Their sacrifice has to mean something." The room was quiet for a long time. Finally, Minesio nodded. "I can do it. But whoever makes the broadcast will have to keep talking for at least 10 minutes. That is how long it will take me to bounce the signal through enough relay stations to hide our location." "I will do it," Daeho said immediately. "Are you sure?" asked Haijin. "Once you speak, there is no going back. The hegemony will hunt you for the rest of your life." Daeho thought about his grandmother. He thought about the workers who died on New Bisen. He thought about all the humans who lived their lives believing they were inferior to aliens, never knowing they came from a proud and free people. "Yes," he said, "I am sure." They spent the next week planning. Minesio worked on the technical details of hijacking the communication network. Daeho practiced what he would say. He decided to read directly from the books, starting with Thomas Paine. On Sunday night, they were ready. Minesio had borrowed equipment from his job and set it up in an abandoned warehouse outside the city. If the hegemony traced the signal, they would find an empty building, not anyone's home. At exactly midnight, when most people would be asleep but shift workers would be awake, Minesio began hacking into the communication system. It took him 8 minutes to break through all the security layers. "You are connected," he whispered to Daeho. "All human colonies in this sector can hear you. Start talking." Daeho took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. "My fellow humans," he began. "My name is not important, but my message is, you have been lied to about who you are and where you came from." His voice was shaking at first, but it grew stronger as he continued. 3 days ago, 47 humans were murdered on New Bizin for asking to be treated with dignity. The hegemony calls this maintaining order. I call it murder. He opened the first book and began to read. These are the words of Thomas Paine, a human who lived 300 years ago. The cause of America is in a great measure the cause of all mankind. Many circumstances have and will arise which are not local but universal, and through which the principles of all lovers of mankind are affected. Deho explained what the words meant. He told the listeners about democracy, about human rights, about the time when humans ruled themselves. For 15 minutes, he read from the books and explained their meaning. He told humans that they were not inferior. He told them they had a right to freedom. He told them their ancestors had been brave and intelligent people who had built great civilizations. The books I am reading from were saved by humans who knew this day would come, he said at the end. They knew that someday we would need to remember who we really are. That day is today. When the broadcast ended, Minesio quickly shut down the equipment. They left the warehouse separately and went home. Deho did not sleep that night. He lay in bed wondering if anyone had been listening. He wondered if his words would make any difference. The next morning, he got his answer. Reports came in from across the human colonies. Work slowdowns, protests, and acts of defiance were happening everywhere. Humans were demanding answers about their history. They were asking why they were not allowed to govern themselves. Most importantly, they were talking about the voice they had heard in the night. They called him the Reader, and they wanted to hear more. Deho's revolution had begun. The hegemony's response came swiftly and brutally. 3 days after Deho's first broadcast, Inquisitor Vexhai arrived on Kepler 442B with a fleet of warships and 1,000 soldiers. Vexhai belonged to the Kethver, a species that looked like giant lizards walking on 2 legs. They had ruled the military arm of the hegemony for centuries. Vexhai was known throughout the galaxy for his cruelty. When species refused to obey hegemony law, he was the one they sent to make examples. Deho watched from his office window as the alien ships landed in the city center. Black armored soldiers poured out of the ships like insects from a hive. They began setting up checkpoints on every street corner. No one could move through the city without being stopped and questioned. "Attention, human citizens," Vexhai's voice boomed from speakers throughout the city. His words were translated into human languages, but his voice was cold and threatening. "Dangerous criminals are spreading illegal ideas among you. Anyone with information about these criminals will be rewarded. Anyone helping these criminals will be executed." That evening, the arrests began. The hegemony had been watching and listening. They had identified humans who had been acting differently. Since the broadcast, people who had been asking questions about human history. People who had been talking about freedom and rights. Li Shangho was the first to be taken. Soldiers broke down his door at midnight and dragged him from his bed while his wife and children screamed. By morning, 12 more humans had been arrested. Deho met with Minesio in a different location each day, never staying in one place for long. They watched in horror as their friends disappeared one by one. "We have to stop the broadcasts," Minesio said during one of their secret meetings. "If we keep going, they will catch us all." "No," Deho said firmly. "This is exactly what they want. They want us to be afraid. They want us to stop. But our people are being tortured. Shangho has not been seen for a week. They might be killing him right now." Deho felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. Every person who was arrested because of his decision to speak out. But he thought about the books, about the words of brave humans who had faced similar choices in the past. Frederick Douglass wrote that if there is no struggle, there is no progress, Deho said. The hegemony wants us to believe that resistance is hopeless. But every person they arrest proves that our message is working. They are afraid. That night, despite the danger, Deho made his second broadcast. "My fellow humans," he said into the microphone, "they are trying to silence us with fear. They arrest our friends and neighbors. They want us to believe that speaking the truth is a crime. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. He knew that hegemony hunters were getting closer to finding him with each broadcast. But I want to read you the words of a human named Martin Luther King, who faced similar oppression centuries ago. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Deho explained what the words meant. He talked about how all humans were connected, how the freedom of one affected the freedom of all. He read from more books about resistance and courage. The broadcast reached not just human colonies, but alien worlds as well. Species across the galaxy heard about these strange human ideas of individual freedom and justice. Some aliens began to question their own situations, but the broadcast also gave Vexhai new clues about who the reader might be. The next day, Kim Tae-young was arrested while shopping for food. The soldiers were waiting for him outside the market. They beat him unconscious before dragging him away. Haijin came to Daeho's emergency meeting location in tears. They took Tae-young in broad daylight. They wanted people to see. They are sending a message. What kind of message? Asked Medesio. That no one is safe. That we should all surrender before they come for us too. 3 more readers were arrested that week. The network that had taken months to build was falling apart. In days, the remaining members were terrified. Some wanted to destroy their copies of the books and pretend they had never been involved, but something unexpected began to happen. Even as the readers were being captured, new people started joining the cause. Humans who had never heard of the original books began making their own protests. They painted messages on walls. They refused to work overtime. They asked their alien supervisors difficult questions about human rights. Yin Sujin was one of these new rebels. She worked as a pilot flying cargo ships between colonies. After hearing Daeho's broadcasts, she began carrying more than just cargo. She started smuggling messages between human settlements, coordinating resistance activities across multiple worlds. When hegemony officials ordered her to report any suspicious human behavior she saw during her travels, she refused. I will not spy on my own people, she told her alien supervisor. They fired her immediately. But word of her defiance spread quickly among human pilots and ship crews. The hegemony found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. Usually, when they arrested the leaders of a rebellion, the rebellion died. But this human resistance seemed to grow stronger each time they tried to crush it. Vexhai was frustrated. In his reports to the Hegemony Council, he wrote, "These humans respond to oppression differently than other species. Instead of being discouraged by arrests and executions, they seem to become more determined. The ideas they call freedom and democracy spread like a virus." After 2 weeks of arrests, Vexhai decided to try a different approach. He would make the captured readers talk. He would torture them until they revealed everything about their network and their leader. Kim Tae-young was the first to be questioned. They brought him to a cold metal room deep underground. Vexhai stood over him, his yellow eyes glowing in the dim light. "Tell me about the reader," Vexhai hissed. "Tell me his real name, and your suffering will end quickly." Tae-young's face was bruised and swollen, but his voice was steady. "I do not know his real name. None of us do." "Lies?" Vexhai said. He signaled to his guards, who activated a pain device attached to Tae-young's chest. Tae-young screamed, but when the pain stopped, he spoke again. "You can torture me all you want. The ideas you are fighting are bigger than any one person. You cannot arrest an idea." For hours, they tortured him. They demanded names, locations, plans. But Tae-young revealed nothing useful. Even when the pain became unbearable, he only repeated phrases from the forbidden books. "We hold these truths to be self-evident," he gasped between screams, "that all sentient beings are created equal." Other captured readers showed the same resistance. The more the hegemony tortured them, the more determined they became. They quoted the books from memory, turning their interrogations into lessons about human dignity and courage. Vexhai realized he was facing an enemy unlike any he had fought before. These humans were not just rebelling against hegemony rule. They were rebelling against the entire idea that any species should rule over another, and their rebellion was spreading beyond the human colonies. Reports came in from across the galaxy. Other species were starting to ask the same questions that humans were asking. They wanted to know why the hegemony had the right to make decisions for everyone else. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years was beginning to crack. And it all started with one human reading from some old books. Deho did not know about the torture his friends were enduring, but he knew they had been captured. Each arrest made him more determined to continue. He would not let their sacrifice be meaningless. He prepared for his third broadcast, knowing it might be his last. Deho's third broadcast changed everything. This time, he did not just read from the human books. He read the names of every captured reader and told their stories. He spoke about Kim Tae-young's courage under torture. He talked about Lee Chang-ho's love for his family. He made the captured humans into heroes instead of criminals. These brave people knew the risks, Deho said into the microphone. They chose to share the truth even though they knew it might cost them their lives. They are not terrorists or criminals. They are freedom fighters, just like the humans who wrote these books centuries ago. But this broadcast reached far beyond human colonies. Alien species across the galaxy heard it too, and something unexpected began to happen on the peaceful planet Nalthar. A young alien named Zilania heard Deho's words about families and freedom. The Nalthi were a gentle species that looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin and large eyes. For generations, they had been forced to give their children to the hegemony military when they turned 16. Zilania had 2 sons, and their 16th birthdays were coming soon. She had always accepted that this was the way things worked. The hegemony needed soldiers, so all species had to contribute their young people. But after hearing the human talk about the right of families to stay together, Zilania began to question this law. Why should she lose her children forever? Why could they not choose their own paths in life? She was not alone. Across Nalthar, parents began asking the same questions. When hegemony officials came to collect the 16-year-old children, they found something they had never seen before: resistance. Nalthi parents formed circles around their children, linking arms and refusing to move. They spoke softly but firmly. "These are our children. You cannot take them." The hegemony soldiers did not know what to do. The Nalthi had never resisted before. They had always been obedient and peaceful. But now they were acting like the rebellious humans. Similar scenes were happening on other worlds. The artistic Erie species began creating paintings and songs that expressed individual thoughts instead of government-approved messages. For the first time in centuries, Erie artists painted pictures of freedom and asked questions about why they could only create what the hegemony approved. On the industrial world of Korath, the insect-like workers began demanding better conditions in their factories. They had heard about the human miners on New Bizan and realized they faced the same problems. If humans could ask for dignity and fair treatment, why could they not do the same? Jang Mikyung watched all of this from her office in the hegemony capital city. She worked as a human diplomat, one of the few humans allowed to work in the government. Her job was to help the hegemony understand human behavior and keep human colonies peaceful, but Mikyung had been listening to Deho's broadcasts in secret. She had found digital copies of the Forbidden books and read them all. Now she understood that her real job was not to help the hegemony control humans, but to help humans free themselves. Mikyung had access to information that other rebels did not. She could see internal hegemony reports about the spreading unrest. She knew which species were starting to rebel and which planets were becoming problems for the government. She began using this information to help the resistance. When she learned that hegemony forces were planning to attack a Nalthi settlement, she found a way to warn them. When she discovered that Erie artists were going to be arrested, she helped them hide their illegal artwork. Most importantly, she began secretly meeting with diplomats from other species. These aliens worked for the hegemony, but some of them were starting to have doubts about the system they served. "The humans have shown us something important," Mikyung told a eerie diplomat during one secret meeting. They have shown us that we do not have to accept oppression just because it has always existed. The eerie diplomat, whose name was Veltar, nodded slowly. My people are artists by nature. We create beauty and meaning. But the hegemony only allows us to create what they approve. We have forgotten how to express our own thoughts and feelings. The human books talk about something called freedom of expression, Mikyung said. She had brought a small device containing digital copies of the books. It means the right to create what your heart tells you to create, not what the government wants. Veltar read some of the human writings and was amazed. These ideas speak to something deep inside me. Something I thought I had lost. Mikyung was building a secret network of alien diplomats who were sympathetic to the revolutionary ideas. They called themselves the Awakened, and they began spreading human concepts of freedom to their own species. Meanwhile, Yoon Soo-jin had become a legend among human pilots and ship crews. After being fired for refusing to spy on other humans, she had stolen a cargo ship and become an outlaw. But instead of hiding, she used her stolen ship to help the rebellion. Soo-jin created a network of smugglers and rebels that operated across multiple star systems. They carried more than just goods between planets. They carried messages, hope, and copies of the Forbidden Books. Every species deserves to be free, Soo-jin told her crew during one dangerous mission to deliver supplies to a Nauthi settlement. The humans started this revolution, but it belongs to everyone now. Her ship, which she had renamed Liberty, became a symbol of hope for oppressed beings across the galaxy. Whenever people heard that the Liberty was coming to their system, they knew help was on the way. The hegemony was struggling to contain the spreading rebellion. Inquisitor Vexhai sent urgent reports to the ruling council. The situation is worse than we initially calculated. The human ideas are spreading faster than we can stop them. Multiple species are now refusing to follow hegemony law. The council members were afraid. They had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years through fear and control. But fear was no longer working. These new ideas about freedom and dignity were proving stronger than their weapons. On the council floor, there were heated debates about how to respond. Some members wanted to destroy all human colonies completely. If we eliminate the source of these dangerous ideas, the other species will return to obedience, argued one council member, but others worried that such extreme action would only make the rebellion stronger. We have already created martyrs by arresting and torturing the human leaders, said another. If we commit genocide, we will turn every human into a symbol of resistance. While the hegemony leaders argued, the rebellion continued to grow. Species that had never communicated with each other before began working together. The gentle Nauthi shared resources with the artistic Eerie. The industrial Korath workers coordinated with human colonies to organize system-wide strikes. For the first time in galactic history, multiple species were united not by conquest or trade, but by shared ideas about freedom and justice. Daeho continued his broadcasts, but now he was not alone. Alien voices joined his transmissions, speaking in their own languages about freedom and dignity. The broadcasts became a chorus of hope that reached every corner of the galaxy. We are no longer just humans fighting for human freedom, Daeho said during one broadcast. We are all sentient beings fighting for the right to control our own destinies. The hegemony wants us to believe that some species are meant to rule and others are meant to serve. But we know the truth. All beings are created equal. The words that had started in old human books were now being spoken in hundreds of languages on thousands of worlds. The revolution had become exactly what the hegemony feared most, an idea whose time had come. And ideas, as Daeho had learned from his grandmother's books, were bulletproof. The end came faster than anyone expected. 6 months after Daeho's first broadcast, the hegemony made their final, desperate decision. They would destroy every human colony in the galaxy. If they could not stop the ideas, they would eliminate the species that created them. The order came from the highest levels of the Hegemony Council. All human settlements are to be considered terrorist bases. Use whatever force is necessary to end this rebellion. But the council had made a terrible mistake. They thought the revolution was still just a human problem. Admiral Kexmore of the Hegemony Navy was given command of the operation. He was a veteran soldier who had crushed dozens of rebellions across the galaxy. But as he prepared his fleet to attack the human colonies, something unexpected happened. Half of his ship captains refused to follow the order. Captain Yulanara, a Nauthi officer who had served the Hegemony for 20 years, stood up during the battle planning meeting. "I will not be part of genocide," she said clearly. "The humans have done nothing but speak the truth. If speaking truth is a crime, then we are the criminals." Admiral Kexmore was shocked. "You swore an oath to serve the Hegemony. You will follow orders or face execution." "I swore an oath to serve justice," Yulanara replied. "And there is no justice in murdering innocents." One by one, other captains stood up and joined her. Eerie officers, Korath commanders, even some Kethver soldiers refused to participate in the attack. The human ideas of conscience and moral duty had spread throughout the military. The Hegemony fleet split in half. Ships that remained loyal to the government faced ships crewed by rebels and deserters. The civil war that the Council had tried to prevent was now happening inside their own forces. On Kepler 442b, Deho watched the news reports with amazement. The galaxy was tearing itself apart, and it had all started with his grandmother's hidden books. Min-SO found him in his apartment, staring out the window at the Hegemony ships fighting each other in the sky above their city. "The military is breaking apart," Min-SO said. "Half the fleet has joined our side, but the other half is still coming to destroy the human colonies." "Then we fight," Deho said simply. "We have been reading about revolution and freedom. Now we get to live it." But the humans were not alone. Across the galaxy, other species were rising up at the same time. When Hegemony forces tried to attack human settlements, they found Nauthi ships protecting them. When they attempted to destroy rebel bases, Eerie artists had painted false coordinates that sent the attackers to empty space. Yun Sujin had united the smugglers and pirates into an unlikely navy. Her ship, the Liberty, led a fleet of stolen vessels against the Hegemony warships. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had something the Hegemony forces lacked. They knew what they were fighting for. Remember, Sujin broadcast to her rebel fleet, "We are not just fighting for our own freedom. We are fighting for the freedom of every being in this galaxy. Today, we show the universe that tyranny can be defeated." The battles were fierce, but the Hegemony discovered something that terrified them. When beings fought for freedom instead of following orders, they fought harder and smarter. Rebel crews took incredible risks to protect civilians. They sacrificed their ships to save others. They refused to surrender even when facing certain death. On the capital world of the Hegemony, the government was falling apart. Jang Meek-young had convinced dozens of alien diplomats to join the Awakened. Together, they had been sabotaging government operations from the inside. When the military split in half, Meek-young made her move. She broadcast the location of all Hegemony prison camps to the rebel forces. Within hours, thousands of political prisoners were being freed, including Kim Tae-young and the other captured readers. Tae-young was weak from months of torture, but his spirit was unbroken. When rebel forces found him in his cell, the first thing he asked was, "Is the reader still broadcasting?" "Every night," his rescuer told him. "And now the whole galaxy listens." The Hegemony Council met in emergency session as their empire crumbled. Around them, rebel forces were advancing on the capital. Half their military had turned against them. Species across the galaxy were declaring independence. How did this happen? Demanded the council leader. It was just one human with some old books. Inquisitor Vexhai, bruised and exhausted from fighting rebel forces, gave his final report. "The humans have taught the galaxy something we never anticipated. They have shown that ideas can be more powerful than weapons. They have proven that beings who know they are free cannot be enslaved." The final blow came when the Hegemony's own capital city rose in rebellion. Alien civilians, inspired by the broadcasts and the rebel victories, surrounded government buildings and demanded the council's surrender. Deho made his final broadcast from the steps of the former hegemony palace. Beings from dozens of species stood with him, holding copies of the human books that had started the revolution. "My fellow citizens of the galaxy," he began, and for the first time he was not speaking just to humans. "Today we are all free. Today we have proven that no empire, no matter how powerful, can defeat an idea whose time has come." He held up the original copy of Thomas Paine's book, the one his grandmother had saved so many years ago. "These books taught us that all beings are created equal. They taught us that governments should serve the people, not rule them. They taught us that freedom is not a gift to be given, but a right to be claimed." Around him the crowd cheered in dozens of languages. Humans stood next to Nalthi. Eerie artists painted murals of the celebration. Korath workers sang songs of freedom. "The galactic hegemony is dead," Deho announced. "In its place we will build something new. A confederation of free worlds where every species governs itself and no one rules over another." The crowd erupted in celebration. Across the galaxy on thousands of worlds, beings celebrated their newfound freedom. Within a year, the Galactic Confederation was established. Each species would govern its own worlds according to its own values and traditions. Disputes would be settled by negotiation and vote, not by force. Deho was elected as the first Secretary of Cultural Preservation. His job was to ensure that never again would any species' history and literature be suppressed. The books that had started the revolution were translated into every language in the galaxy. Children of all species learned about the human concepts of democracy, freedom, and individual rights. But they also learned about Nalthi values of family unity, Eerie appreciation for beauty, and Korath dedication to honest work. The galaxy had discovered that diversity made it stronger, not weaker, years later when historians asked Deho how. A language researcher with some old books had brought down the most powerful empire in galactic history. He smiled and quoted one of his favorite human writers, "The pen is mightier than the sword, but sometimes the voice is mightier than both." The revolution that began with 12 forbidden books had given freedom to trillions of beings across the galaxy. And it all started because one old woman had been brave enough to save some books, and one young man had been brave enough to read them aloud. The empire never recovered, but the galaxy was better for it.